as you've grown up through the different phases of journalism and just kind of seen everything keep coming, like everything keeps being like on the cusp and you seem to be right there with it, what do you think is relevant or the most important thing for like aspiring young journalists such as myself or Kayla to focus on for the future? What do you think the media of the future is going to look like, basically?
Well, it's certainly starting to get, it's becoming very different than it used to be. First, we're starting to mix news and entertainment. Mm-hmm. Second, we're starting to mix news and opinions. And third, we're starting to make shorter and shorter pieces because people's attention spans are getting shorter and shorter. Mm-hmm. So people are now consuming news information in short bursts. And regrettably, some of these trends, although they have certain benefits, also have some disadvantages. If you're only reading a short little excerpt, you can't really get the context. If you're mixing news with entertainment, there's the potential of distortion, of the comedian making a statement that sounds factual but really isn't and potentially confusing you. There are some benefits as well. I mean, today's consumer has just now become so used to getting everything in an entertaining form that if you don't present it in a kind of an appealing way, then you lose them altogether. But what I would encourage you to do as a journalist is to not lose sight of the fact that there are some traditional values which are still valid today, and to not fall prey to only catering to the new values of making the information shorter and more entertaining and adding attitude to it. Sure. Try to balance out the new values with the old values, and I hate to call them old values because they're really basic values. You know, is this, the article that you're writing, is it informative? That's important. Second, are you fair? You know, if you're labeling this as an opinion piece, it's okay for you to present your opinion because it is an opinion piece, right? Mm-hmm. But try to present the counter argument respectfully. You know, in other words, say, well, you know, there's, you know, play devil's advocate, if you will. Don't just throw just your opinion in there. And if you're not doing an opinion piece, if you're doing a news report, then stay away from taking sides in the story. The only time where you might come in is if clearly someone's saying something that's clearly not factual, that's not supported by the facts. It is your duty to point out that you have factual evidence that contradicts the statement they just made. But it's different from interjecting your own opinion in the mix. So fairness is hugely important. Factual evidence. Support every statement that you make with factual evidence. And try to ideally find verifiable evidence, that someone else could come in, verify that it is in fact factual. Try to link to the primary source document so someone can see the entire transcript of the speech, particularly if it's been well transcribed. Mm-hmm. And just don't omit the details, don't gloss over. No matter what your deadline is, it might be better for you to hold off on releasing a detail that hasn't been thoroughly checked than to release it as if you had checked it. Mm-hmm. If you haven't had a chance to check it yourself, state that you haven't. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's important. So factual information is huge. Context, very helpful. So once you've covered the story on Fabrice Florin, zoom out and say, well, how does that story compare to other people in that field, and how is that story different, and why is that story meaningful to the reader or the viewer of your piece? So that's what context does. It helps them place it in proper context in their own worldview. Sourcing. Sourcing is huge. You know, make sure whenever you can, particularly if you're making a statement that could affect people's lives, to go out of your way to seek multiple sources from very different perspectives, and try to get to primary sources if you can, people who were there at the event, people who have access to the core information, secondary if you can't, tertiary if you have to. Try to also get a quote from, you know, that's meaningful. anonymous sources, avoid them unless absolutely necessary. Explain why they're anonymous, if they have to be anonymous. And most importantly, make sure that they're from multiple perspectives, independent perspectives, from someone who's not related to the story, who doesn't have an axe to grind. Or if they have an axe to grind, mention what the axe is. Okay? All these core values are important. Just because things are changing and we're all having fun doing little blog posts and doing Jon Stewart, whom I love, doesn't mean that we should abandon these core principles. They're as important as ever. And in fact, they're not even just the principles of journalism. They're the principles of good citizenship. As a citizen, you should be fair. You should base your statements on facts whenever possible. You should try to seek multiple sources to make informed decisions. You should always look at the big picture, not just the little teeny details. All these are part of being a good citizen. Mm-hmm. The journalist is just your representative, so they've been tasked with these values so that they can serve you as citizens. But you yourself now are in control. You no longer have to be the authoritative reporter. You as a citizen have a role to play. And you can go through News Trust or through other services like that, and you can make corrections based on fact and based on that methodology of verification. It's very similar to the process of scientific inquiry, where you posit a hypothesis. You say, here's my hypothesis. I'm going to try to prove or disprove it based on factual information and testing, and then I'll give you my findings as to whether or not the hypothesis held through. Well, that same general methodology is applied to journalism. Journalism, in a way, is as much a science as an art. So resist the temptation to just make it an art, and continue to uphold the principles of science, because they'll serve you better and they'll serve your readers better.